The wind howled across the valley as rain pelted the small wooden house perched on the hillside. Elias pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders, staring out the window at the storm. He had lived alone for years, far from the nearest village. The isolation had never bothered him, the quiet suited him. But tonight something felt different. The air seemed heavier, charged with a strange tension that made his skin prickle. A sudden crash of thunder shook the valley and Elias jumped. Then he heard it, a loud, strangled roar followed by a heavy thud from the woods below. Without thinking, he grabbed a lantern and ran outside, the mud sucking at his boots. Through the sheets of rain, he saw a massive figure struggling among the trees. At first he thought it was a fallen tree or some creature trapped by the storm, but as he approached he froze. A dragon. Its scales were dark, streaked with black and red, and its wings were torn and bleeding. Smoke curled from its nostrils, and one eye opened slowly, revealing intelligence and fear. The creature let out a low groan, and Elias felt a shiver run down his spine. This was no wild beast, it was hurt, desperate, and searching for help. Elias's heart raced. Every story he had ever heard about dragons told of their danger and power. But as he watched the dragon's labored breathing, fear gave way to something else, compassion. He had a small first aid kit and some blankets in his house. Carefully he stepped closer, speaking in soft, steady words. "It's okay. I won't hurt you." The dragon's eye flickered toward him as if it understood. He worked slowly, dragging the dragon out of the mud and into the shelter of his barn. Its body trembled violently and Elias had to think quickly. Using ropes and blankets, he secured the dragon in a safe corner, careful not to hurt it further. The dragon hissed softly but did not resist. Elias noticed that its wing was badly broken, probably from a fall, and its side was scorched, blackened in patches. He had no idea what had caused such injuries, but the storm had left him no choice. Over the next few hours, Elias cleaned the dragon's wounds as best as he could. He used herbal salves and stitched torn scales with careful hands. The dragon hissed and growled occasionally but allowed him to work. Every now and then, it tilted its massive head toward him as if studying him. Elias felt a strange connection forming. Despite its size and fearsome appearance, the dragon seemed to trust him in ways humans rarely did. Night fell and the storm showed no sign of stopping. Elias made a small fire and prepared a simple meal, unsure whether the dragon would eat anything. To his surprise, the dragon sniffed the food, then carefully picked up a piece with its clawed foot and ate. Elias smiled. Trust, it seemed, was growing between them. The dragon's breathing became steadier and the tension in the room eased. As the hours passed, Elias realized something astonishing. The dragon was not just a mindless beast. Its eyes followed him, intelligent and aware, full of memory and thought. When he spoke, it seemed to respond not in words but in subtle gestures. A tilt of the head, a flick of the tail, a low rumble that almost sounded like speech. Elias wondered what had driven it to his home. Was it the storm or had it been searching for someone, anyone who could help? Elias's mind raced. He knew he could not keep the dragon forever. Villagers would never accept such a creature, and the authorities would come with weapons. But he could not abandon it either. It had come to him, wounded and trusting, and he could not turn away. He decided then that he would protect it no matter the cost. The dragon shifted, leaning against the wall for support, and Elias noticed a thin trail of blood leading from its wing. Carefully, he examined the injury and improvised a sling to hold it steady. The dragon growled softly but allowed him to work. Elias felt a rush of pride mixed with fear. He had no idea how he would manage this, but for the first time he felt that his life, quiet and ordinary, was becoming extraordinary. Hours passed into the deep night. The storm continued, but inside the barn, a fragile peace settled. Elias found a corner and sat down, watching the dragon breathe. Its chest rose and fell with effort, but each breath seemed a little easier than the last. He whispered to it, telling stories of the valley, of the quiet hills, and of his life alone. The dragon's eye followed him, glowing faintly in the firelight. It seemed to listen as though it understood not just his words, but his intentions, his heart. By morning the storm had passed. The sun broke through the clouds, casting pale light into the barn. The dragon stirred, its breathing stronger. Elias felt a cautious optimism. They had survived the night together and somehow a bond had formed. He did not yet know the dragon's story, why it had been hurt, or what dangers might follow. But he knew one thing: life would never be the same again. As he looked at the dragon, Elias felt a strange sense of purpose. The creature had come to him, wounded and desperate, and in helping it, he had found a connection unlike any he had ever known. Something deep inside him told him that this was only the beginning, that this encounter would change both their lives forever. And for the first time in years, Elias felt a spark of excitement and fear mingle in a way that made his heart beat faster. He reached out a hand and the dragon lowered its head slightly, allowing him to touch its scaled snout. In that moment, the unspoken understanding between human and dragon became clear. They were no longer strangers. They were allies, bound by need, trust, and an unspoken promise that neither would abandon the other. And somewhere in the distance, beyond the hills and forests, the world waited, unaware that a bond had formed that might one day shake the skies. Elias sat back, watching the dragon stretch its wings slightly, testing it, and a quiet smile crossed his face. The unexpected visitor had arrived, and with it, the first chapter of a story far greater than he could imagine. The morning sun rose over the valley, casting warm light across Elias's small home and the barn where the dragon rested. Its breathing was steady now, and its eyes followed him with a quiet awareness. Elias had never seen a creature like this before. He had heard stories of dragons in old books, but nothing could compare to the presence of one alive and trusting him. As Elias prepared food for the dragon, a distant roar echoed through the valley. The dragon lifted its head, ears twitching, and let out a low rumble in response. Elias froze. Another dragon? He had not expected this. But as he stepped outside, the forest seemed alive with movement. More figures appeared through the trees, each one limping, one wing bent, another with scales scorched and battered. Elias felt his heart race. These dragons were injured, all of them, and they were moving toward him as if they knew he could help. He dropped the basket of food and ran toward the first wounded dragon, signaling for the others to stay back. The dragons obeyed in an almost human-like understanding, circling quietly as he approached. He worked quickly, leading the dragons to the barn and improvising makeshift beds. He treated burns and cuts with the herbs he had, wrapping broken limbs as best he could. Some dragons hissed, some growled, but none resisted for long. They seemed to sense his intention and, slowly, their trust grew. Elias marveled at their intelligence. These were not mindless beasts. They were thoughtful, aware, and capable of emotion. Over the next few days, Elias learned their names, or at least the sounds they made when referring to themselves. There was Kale, a large dragon with silver streaks along his black scales. Lyra, smaller, with deep green scales and a curious tilt to her head. And Draven, the youngest, still learning how to control the fire in his throat. Each dragon had scars and stories etched into their bodies, silent testimonies of battles and escape. Elias felt honored that they shared his space, that they allowed him to help. As the dragons healed, they began to explore the valley. Elias watched them cautiously, knowing that villagers would be frightened if they saw so many dragons at once. Yet the dragons seemed peaceful, almost grateful. They moved in quiet, deliberate ways, communicating through gestures, subtle growls, and the occasional beat of wings. Elias had to adapt quickly, learning to read their body language and understand their moods. One evening, as Elias fed the dragons, Kale nudged him toward the edge of the valley. Curious, Elias followed. There, carved into the side of a cliff, was a deep cave, partially hidden by ivy and shadow. Kale lowered his head and rumbled, gesturing toward the cave. Elias stepped inside and discovered ancient markings along the walls, scenes of dragons flying alongside humans, sharing knowledge, fighting together, and living in harmony. He realized the dragons were trying to show him something, a history forgotten by humans. The discovery changed something inside Elias. He began to see the dragons not just as creatures to heal, but as beings with culture, memories, and intelligence. He wondered what had caused them to flee, why so many were injured. The valley felt safe now, but he sensed danger lingering beyond the mountains. Something, or someone, was hunting them and he would have to be ready. Over the next week, more dragons arrived. Some limped, some dragged a wing behind them, and some were barely able to fly. Elias treated each one, learning new ways to bind wounds and soothe pain. The dragons began to share with each other, showing Elias how they helped and healed their own kind. He was amazed at their cooperation and intelligence. They were forming a small community, united by trust and need, and he was at the center. The dragons were not silent in their appreciation. They would nuzzle him gently, wrap tails around his legs, or hover nearby while he slept. At first he had been afraid of their size and strength, but now he felt a deep bond. He began to understand their subtle ways of speaking. The flick of an ear, the curl of a tail, the rise and fall of wings. Through these gestures they communicated history, gratitude, and even warning. Elias realized he was learning a language older than any human words. One night, while he was tending to Draven's wing, the young dragon began to tremble violently. Elias froze, unsure what was happening. Then he saw shadows moving beyond the trees, strange shapes sliding over the ground. He had no weapon strong enough to fight these intruders. The dragons sensed the danger too, their bodies stiffening, eyes narrow. Kale let out a roar, a warning that echoed through the valley. Elias understood. They were ready to defend their new home, but they needed him as part of the fight. The shadows moved closer, and Elias noticed they were not dragons. Strange, metallic creatures with glowing eyes and long, jointed limbs crept toward the valley. Elias had seen nothing like them before, not even in his most vivid dreams. The dragons growled and hissed, but Elias felt a surge of resolve. He could not let these creatures harm them. Not the dragons that had trusted him, not the ones he had healed. He tried to remember the herbs, the old remedies, anything that could help him protect them. But the fear was heavy. And yet, even in that fear, he felt something stir, a determination he had never known. The dragons were counting on him. Somehow he would find a way to help them survive. The creatures stopped at the edge of the clearing, watching, waiting. The dragons lowered their wings slightly, ready to defend but also wary of Elias's reaction. He stepped forward, holding his hands high, speaking in the softest voice he could muster. "I am with them. They are under my protection." Kale let out a low rumble, Lyra pressed her head against Elias's side, and Draven's small fire flickered weakly but steadily. The metallic creatures paused, sensing a connection they did not understand. Elias did not know if it would be enough, but in that moment he realized something important. The dragons had not come to him by accident. They had sought him, wounded and desperate, because something inside him, something he had not yet discovered, was exactly what they needed. As the night deepened, Elias prepared for what was to come. The valley, once quiet and isolated, had become a gathering place for the wounded, a refuge for dragons who had nowhere else to go. And at the heart of it all stood a human who was learning, slowly but surely, that helping these creatures could change not only their lives but his own. For Elias, the peaceful valley he had known was gone. In its place was a living, breathing community, strange and fierce, yet loyal and trusting. He had no idea what dangers lay ahead, but one thing was certain. The dragons had chosen him and he would not fail them. Elias woke before sunrise, the valley wrapped in pale light. The dragons stirred around him, stretching wings and flicking tails, each one slowly regaining strength. Kale's silver-streaked scales glimmered as he flexed his massive wings, while Lyra padded softly over to Elias, nudging his hand for attention. Even Draven, still small and unsteady, tried to rise and test his fire. Elias smiled. The dragons were healing, but he sensed that the valley held more secrets than he had realized. Earlier, Kale had nudged Elias toward the cliff cave, and curiosity had driven him to explore it. Today he felt he had to go further, to understand why the dragons had sought him and why so many of them were wounded. He stepped carefully into the cave, lantern in hand. The walls glowed faintly, etched with patterns that seemed to move in the firelight. Dragons flying alongside humans, battles with creatures Elias could not recognize, scenes of cities in the clouds and forests alive with dragons. Elias traced the markings with his fingers, feeling a shiver run through him. The deeper he went, the more he realized that these dragons were not just survivors, they were part of a history humans had long forgotten. And as he stared at one panel showing a human touching the forehead of a dragon, sending a pulse of light that healed its wounds, something inside him stirred. Memories flickered at the edges of his mind, vague stories from his parents about his family's gift, tales he had always dismissed as myth. Suddenly, Elias remembered. His parents had told him that their bloodline carried a secret, a rare ability to influence life in ways ordinary humans could not. It had lain dormant in him for years, untested until now. The dragons had found him not just for aid, but because he carried that ability. His heart pounded. Could it be true? Could he really have the power to help them in a way no human ever had? Kale stepped closer, his massive head brushing Elias's shoulder. His eyes, intelligent and calm, seemed to study him as if expecting him to understand. Elias felt a strange warmth spreading from his chest to his hands, a tingling that he could not explain. He reached out, touching the silver-streaked scales, and felt a pulse of energy, subtle yet alive. The dragon shivered and exhaled slowly, a sound almost like a sigh of relief. Over the next days, Elias experimented quietly, trying to awaken this hidden power. He placed his hands on scorched scales and slowly, warmth spread through the injured areas. Wounds began to close, burns faded, and broken limbs seemed less painful. The dragons responded with gentle gestures, nudges of approval, small rumbles that Elias began to understand as thanks. He was learning and they were teaching him. Word of his ability seemed to spread among the dragons. Each night, they gathered around him, leaning in as he practiced, trusting him in ways humans rarely could. They told him their stories through gestures and subtle sounds. Battles with alien invaders, escapes through burning forests, losses of family and friends. Elias listened and remembered that the world outside was dangerous. The dragons were refugees, wounded not just by storms or accidents, but by something darker, something alien that hunted them across the skies. One evening, Elias was tending to Lyra's green scales when a low rumble of warning echoed through the valley. All the dragons stiffened, ears and tails twitching. He followed their gaze to the horizon, where shadows moved over the hills. Shapes glinted in the fading light, mechanical, precise and alien. Elias felt a chill. These were not ordinary predators. They were the ones who had wounded the dragons before, the ones who had driven them here. Kale stepped forward, growling softly, a protective presence at Elias's side. Elias placed a hand on the dragon's chest, feeling the warmth and strength beneath his palm. A surge of energy flowed through him, instinctive and powerful, and he realized his gift was growing. The dragon sensed it too, responding with confidence, their wings stretching, eyes sharp, and fire flickering faintly from Draven's mouth. Together they prepared for what was coming, a silent understanding between human and dragon. That night, Elias stayed close to the dragons, practicing his gift and learning to control it. He discovered that his energy could calm their fear, soothe pain and even boost their strength. Kale, Lyra, and Draven responded immediately, growing stronger, more alert. It was a secret language of power, one that humans had forgotten but that the dragons remembered instinctively. Elias was amazed and frightened by his own abilities, but he also felt hope. The valley, once quiet, became a living fortress. Elias built small defenses with the dragons' help, using fallen trees and rocks to block the paths through the woods. He listened to their subtle guidance, feeling their awareness as if it were his own. The dragons had chosen him not just for healing but because he could lead them, protect them, and stand with them against the unknown threat that loomed in the shadows. One night, while Elias meditated near the cave, Kale nudged him toward a hidden chamber. Inside, more carvings and symbols glowed faintly in the lantern light. They showed humans and dragons fighting together, overcoming invaders with courage and strength. Elias realized that this was a call, a warning, and a lesson. He was not just a healer, he was part of a legacy, a bridge between humans and dragons that had existed long ago. As he left the cave, the first stars appeared in the sky. The dragons gathered around him, forming a protective circle. Elias felt a deep sense of purpose. His secret, once unknown even to himself, was now a force that could change the course of events. He understood that the world beyond the valley was dangerous, but with the dragons he had allies stronger and wiser than any human army. Elias smiled quietly, brushing Draven's head with a gentle hand. "We will face them together," he whispered. The dragons rumbled in agreement, a sound full of loyalty and trust. He had no idea what the coming days would bring, but for the first time he felt ready. His gift, the dragon's strength, and the bond they shared created a force that could not be ignored. The valley was no longer just a home. It was a sanctuary, a place where the wounded could heal, and where a human could discover a power long forgotten. Shadows and dangers waited beyond the mountains, but Elias was no longer just a man. He was a part of something greater, something ancient, and the dragons were his allies. Together they would face the darkness and nothing, not fear, not enemies, could break the trust that had been formed. As the night deepened, Elias looked at the dragons resting around him and realized something profound. The world had changed. He had changed. And in the quiet, secret moments between them, he understood that the bond he shared with these dragons was not just for survival. It was the beginning of a story that could reshape everything humans thought they knew about dragons, power, and courage. The valley was quiet at first, the calm before a storm. Elias stood at the edge of the clearing, feeling the weight of the night around him. The dragons circled above, their wings cutting through the cold wind, eyes alert. Something was coming. He could feel it in the way the air shifted, in the subtle tension of the trees, in the low rumble of Kale's voice. Suddenly, shadows appeared on the horizon. Sleek, metallic shapes glided silently over the hills, glinting in the moonlight. Elias recognized them from before. These were the alien hunters that had wounded the dragons across the lands. They moved in perfect formation, a relentless, unfeeling army, scanning the valley with glowing eyes. Elias's heart pounded. He knew that if they attacked, the dragons would be in danger and he had to be ready. Kale landed beside him with a thud, wings folding slowly. Lyra and Draven hovered near, tense and alert. Elias reached out to touch Kale's snout, feeling the warmth and power that flowed between them. He closed his eyes and focused, letting his hidden gift rise. Energy thrummed through him, pulsing outward, connecting him to the dragons. Their eyes brightened, muscles flexed, and wounds seemed to ease even as the enemy approached. Elias felt fear, but it was tempered by determination. The first wave of alien scouts entered the clearing. They were sleek and fast, with limbs ending in sharp claws and glowing orbs that scanned for life. The dragons responded instantly. Kale roared, a sound that shook the trees and echoed through the valley. Lyra's green scales shimmered as she leapt into the air, breathing fire that scorched the ground in a wide arc. Draven, still young but fierce, spat bursts of flame toward the scouts, forcing them to retreat momentarily. Elias focused, placing his hands on Kale's shoulder. A wave of energy passed from him into the dragon. Kale's wounds, though still healing, felt stronger, and his muscles moved with renewed power. Lyra and Draven responded similarly, as if sensing the source of strength. Together, human and dragons formed a bond of energy and will, unspoken but unbreakable. The aliens paused, seemingly surprised by the force they faced. The main army arrived, larger and faster, surrounding the valley like a tide. Elias's mind raced. He had never faced anything like this before. Yet, as he looked at the dragons, he felt a calm determination. They trusted him. He could not fail. He raised his hands, channeling energy through the earth and into the dragons. Their scales glowed faintly under the moonlight, eyes sharp, wings poised for attack. The connection between them was strong, and Elias felt it guiding him, teaching him how to use his power to protect them. The aliens charged. Kale surged forward, claws and teeth tearing into the first line of attackers. Lyra flew low, breathing fire that forced the enemy back. Draven darted between them, agile and quick, flames flickering from his mouth. Elias focused, sending pulses of energy that healed minor wounds instantly and strengthened their muscles. Each dragon moved with precision, faster and stronger than they had before. Together, they fought as one, coordinated in ways humans could not understand without seeing it. The battle raged through the night. The aliens adapted, moving in patterns Elias did not expect. He realized that they were intelligent hunters, not mindless machines. But the dragons had him and he had them. Each time a dragon faltered, a pulse of energy from Elias renewed them. Each time an alien advanced too quickly, Kale's roar or Lyra's fire stopped it. Elias's fear melted into focus, and he understood the full potential of his gift. Hours passed and the aliens began to retreat. They had underestimated the bond between a human and dragons, the force of trust and energy that flowed between them. Kale landed with a heavy thud, breathing hard but triumphant. Lyra curled near Elias's side, flames flickering weakly from exhaustion, and Draven nuzzled him with small, grateful movements. Elias stood among them, chest heaving, realizing that they had survived not by luck, but by courage, skill, and the secret he had only recently discovered. The valley was quiet once more. Smoke rose from scorched earth, and the dragons rested, wings folded and eyes closing in relief. Elias sank to his knees, exhausted but alive. He had faced the impossible and discovered that his gift, combined with the dragon's strength, was more powerful than any enemy. Yet he also knew this was only the beginning. The aliens would not give up so easily, and the dragons would always face threats in the world beyond the valley. Kale approached, head lowered in a silent gesture of respect. Elias placed a hand on the dragon's snout, feeling warmth and trust. Lyra curled around his legs and Draven nestled close to his side. The bond between them was stronger than ever. Elias realized that he was no longer just a human living quietly in the valley. He was a protector, a healer, and a part of something far greater than himself. As dawn broke, Elias looked out over the valley, the first rays of sunlight glinting off the dragon's scales. He thought of the future, of dangers that might come, of battles that might rage, and of the dragons who now trusted him completely. He knew the world beyond the mountains was vast and dangerous, but he also knew that together they could face it. For the first time, Elias felt a deep sense of purpose. The dragons had sought him for a reason, and he had discovered his secret in time to save them. The valley, once a quiet refuge, had become a battlefield and a sanctuary all at once. Elias understood that his life had changed forever, that the bond between human and dragons was more powerful than any fear, and that the reckoning had shown him the strength that lay hidden within himself. He knelt beside Kale, Lyra, and Draven, feeling their warmth and trust. "We survived," he whispered. "And we will face whatever comes next, together." The dragons rumbled in agreement, a sound full of loyalty, relief, and quiet triumph. Elias smiled, knowing that the valley had become more than a home. It had become a place of courage, healing, and unity, where a human and dragons could stand together against the world. The sun rose higher, casting light across the valley and revealing the scars of the battle. But Elias did not see destruction. He saw survival, strength, and hope. The reckoning was over, but the story was far from finished. The bond between human and dragons had been proven, and in that bond lay the power to change everything. Elias understood now that his secret was not just for healing, it was for leading, for standing where it mattered, and for showing that even the smallest human could make a difference in a world filled with monsters. He stood, brushing dirt from his clothes, and looked at the dragons. "We have survived tonight," he said. "And tomorrow we will be stronger." The dragons responded with soft growls and flickers of flame, a chorus of trust and readiness. Elias felt hope stir within him, a feeling he had not known in years. He knew that danger would come again, but he also knew that together they could face it no matter what. The valley, once quiet and isolated, now held life, power, and purpose. Elias had discovered who he was, and the dragons had found a human who could stand with them. Together they had survived the reckoning, and together they would face whatever the world dared to send their way. The valley was calm in the early morning, the sun painting gold across the hills and rivers. Elias walked among the dragons who moved slowly, still recovering from the battle of the night before. Kale's silver-streaked scales shone in the sunlight, and Lyra stretched her green wings carefully. Even Draven, small but determined, tried to fly short distances, testing his strength. Elias smiled, feeling the quiet triumph of survival. He had never imagined a life like this, surrounded by dragons, sharing a bond no human could explain. Yet it felt natural. The valley was no longer just his home. It was theirs, a sanctuary where humans and dragons could heal and grow together. He thought of the battles ahead, the dangers still lurking beyond the mountains, and he knew that their strength came not only from fire and wings but from trust, loyalty, and understanding. Elias spent the morning tending to the dragons, checking their wings, soothing their scars, and offering food. The dragons responded with gentle nudges, low rumbles of appreciation, and occasional playful movements. Draven tried to nudge Elias with his snout but stumbled, making both of them laugh quietly. Elias realized that even in a world filled with danger, moments of peace and joy were possible. By midday, the dragons gathered around the edge of the valley, wings outstretched as if preparing to fly. Kale nudged Elias forward with his snout, urging him to stand among them. Elias felt a surge of confidence. His gift, once hidden, had grown stronger. He placed his hands on Kale's scales, sending warmth and energy through the dragons. Their muscles flexed, wounds fading further, and Elias felt a connection stronger than ever before. "Today we begin something new," he whispered. The dragons seemed to understand. They circled above him, their wings beating in rhythm, a quiet celebration of survival and unity. Elias realized that they were no longer just creatures he had helped. They were allies, friends, and a part of his life in ways he could never have imagined. That evening, Elias gathered firewood, preparing a small meal. As he worked, Kale nudged him toward the horizon, pointing with his massive head. In the distance, smoke rose from the mountains, villages, forests, and the remnants of previous battles. Elias understood that their presence in the valley would not remain a secret forever. Humans would come, dragons would be noticed, and the world would see the power and intelligence of the creatures he had grown to care for. He thought carefully. Fear had once held him back, but now courage guided him. He would show the dragons to those willing to learn, to teach humans that these creatures were not enemies but allies, beings of intelligence and loyalty. And perhaps, through this, he could prevent future battles, build understanding, and create a stronger bond between humans and dragons. As the sun set, Elias and the dragons watched the sky. The air was cool, filled with the scent of the valley and the warmth of firelight from their small camp. Draven rested against Elias's legs, eyes half closed, while Lyra lay nearby, tail brushing the ground. Kale stood tall, scanning the horizon, vigilant yet calm. Elias felt a sense of pride. He had survived the storm, healed the dragons, and discovered his secret. But more importantly, he had learned that strength came from unity, from trust, and from the courage to stand together. Night fell and the stars shone brightly above the valley. Elias sat among the dragons, listening to their soft rumbles, feeling their steady breathing. He knew that challenges would come, but he also knew that they would face them as a team. The bond between human and dragons was no longer fragile. It was a force that could withstand fear, danger, and even the unknown. The next days passed in preparation and learning. Elias taught the dragons ways to move silently, to coordinate without speaking, and to sense danger with him. The dragons taught him to read their movements, to anticipate their instincts, and to trust the unspoken connection that had formed. They became a unit, each relying on the other, stronger than any army in the world. One morning, a small group of travelers arrived at the valley, cautious and curious. Elias stepped forward, calm and confident, with Kale and Lyra by his side. The travelers froze at the sight of the dragons, fear evident in their eyes. Elias raised his hands, speaking softly. "They are not here to hurt you. They are my friends. They are intelligent, loyal, and capable of great understanding. If you are willing to learn, they will show you." The travelers hesitated, then slowly approached, guided by Elias's calm presence. The dragons remained still, allowing the humans to see their intelligence and trustworthiness. Kale lowered his head slightly, Lyra's wings folded gently, and Draven stepped forward, nudging one of the travelers lightly. Elias realized that this moment was the beginning of something greater, a bridge between humans and dragons that could change how the world saw them. Days turned into weeks, and word of Elias and the dragons spread. Other humans came, some out of fear, others with curiosity, but all witnessed the bond that had formed. The dragons remained protective but calm, showing patience and understanding. Elias taught the humans to respect their power, to see their intelligence, and to understand that fear was unnecessary. Slowly, trust grew beyond the valley, and a new alliance began to form. Elias looked over the valley one evening, the dragons resting around him. He thought of how far they had come, from wounded, fleeing creatures to a united force of intelligence and strength. And he thought of himself, once alone and fearful, now a leader and a protector. The secret he had discovered, the gift within him, had not only healed the dragons but had created a bond that could change the course of the world. He smiled quietly as Draven curled beside him, Lyra resting her head near his shoulder, and Kale standing tall, vigilant and proud. "We've come far," Elias whispered. "But this is only the beginning. Together we can show the world what humans and dragons can accomplish." The valley, once quiet and isolated, had become a place of unity, courage, and hope. Humans and dragons, bound by trust and understanding, had formed a new alliance, one that promised protection, growth, and strength for the future. Elias understood that life would never be ordinary again. Danger might come, storms might rage, and enemies might appear, but together they would stand, strong and unbroken. The dragons shifted around him, their presence a constant reminder of the bond that had formed. Elias felt a deep sense of purpose. He had discovered his secret, healed the dragons, and forged a connection that would last a lifetime. The valley was safe for now, but more importantly, it had become a symbol of what was possible when courage, trust, and unity came together. As the stars sparkled above, Elias whispered once more to his companions, the dragons who had become his family, "We will face the future together. We are stronger than anyone imagines. And no matter what comes, we will survive." The dragons rumbled in agreement, a soft, powerful sound that echoed across the valley. Elias knew that this alliance was more than survival, it was hope, courage, and a promise. The world beyond might never understand them fully, but they would face it together, and nothing could break the bond they had formed. The night was calm, the valley alive with life, and Elias, surrounded by dragons, felt a peace he had never known. They had survived, they had grown, and a new chapter had begun. A chapter where humans and dragons would stand side by side, united, strong, and unstoppable.